Hi, and welcome to the Enneagram Summit for the Helping Profession. I'm the host of the summit, Michele Joy, founder of the Developmental Enneagram for Couples. And we have with us today Michael Naylor. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Michael is the director of the Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Wellbeing. He was trained by Don Riso and Russ Hudson and became a faculty member of the Enneagram Institute. He's been in recovery for 42 years and worked as an addiction counselor for 35 years. He's the author of his recent book, The Alchemy of the Enneagram in Transforming Addiction, a Guide for Professionals, Helping Men Recover. He's an IEA professional and does coaching and teaching internationally. He does in-depth Enneagram interviews on his YouTube channel at Maine Enneagram Interviews on YouTube. And so Michael is here today, and he's going to talk to us about the power of utilizing the Enneagram to help people on their recovery process and during addiction.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So I think maybe you could start by just saying, kind of overall, why do you think the Enneagram is a good tool to helping people with recovery?
Yeah, well, I first discovered the Enneagram when I was 14 years sober, and I was caught in my patterns, habitually miserable in my own unique way, and my therapist, future mentor, said, read Personality Types by Don Riso and read Type 4. And I read Type 4, and of course I was horrified because he had unpeeled me. And what was so apparent to me then at 14 years of sobriety was that my not being aware of my patterns and not being able to name them or see them or know how to abide with them and do the healing work I needed to do. With the aid of the Enneagram, I started seeing, major repetitious sort of mood swings, states of consciousness that I was really used to and even prided myself in, being a neurotic type 4 at that time. And, things like envy, repetitious states of envy that, I didn't even give a second thought to. I would be caught in it. And so I was doing a fair amount of repetitious suffering and, unnecessary suffering that as I learned about the Enneagram, it gave me a navigational tool for how to, first off, start to be more self-aware of myself, and then slowly but surely less reactive and less taken by the patterns. Now, why that's significant for me was that, at 14 years of sobriety, I wasn't happy, I wasn't joyful, I was suffering a lot. And then I began to notice with my other traveling friends, that people would stay sober for a certain amount of time and invariably would bump up against their patterns that, AA isn't designed necessarily to transform or other 12-step programs, and they'd relapse. And the best of the best would go down. And it could be at year 15, 20, 25, 30. I mean, I just had a dear friend who, after 30 years of sobriety, suddenly just felt himself compelled to stay in isolation and not come out. And he's one of the leading people in a particular community. And if it hadn't been for, the wisdom around him, his patterns would have taken him down. And he was a type 5, and something had come up, and he said, I've never had to really deal with my inner world until you're 30. I was able to navigate it. So I noticed that people would have these great stretches of feeling really good and really joyful, and then they would hit a wall, and they wouldn't know what they were hitting. And so it occurred to me that, if I hadn't found out about the Enneagram, the same fate was awaiting me. And so I began, utilizing it, working with people. And what I discovered in using it was it gave me a lot more room for understanding their challenging behaviors and becoming less reactive and judgmental when they, went into a contracted state. And, some types, when they go to contracted states, are more dramatically a pain in the neck than others. Certainly the type 8 and the type 4. But with the understanding of how people respond when they're suffering and the source of it, and even the predictability of it when they're triggered, it created so much more room for me to just be tolerant and patient, and to, with gentleness, point out what I was seeing, being a gentle mirror, so that, being a mirror that doesn't reflect a lot of judgment makes it easier to take in the message. And so there was that, which made a huge difference in terms of being able to help people. But also, as I learned about my type, and, the longer I've been at this, the more humbling the experience is. I had this idea that when I learned about the Enneagram, I remember reading Don Risso's work, and I'm thinking, I should have this handled in about 2 weeks. He just gave me the map. And little did I realize that it was going to be a long, slow journey of observing and working on myself and doing meditation practice and therapy, etc. But that, and the part of the journey would be to be able to learn to consciously experience my patterns, not react against them, not beat myself up, and become, a gentle observer of my patterns that started to dissipate their hypnotic capacity to take me out in the moment and to misinterpret reality. So that alone helped me understand the slowness of change. But prior to that, and this idea that people get into therapy and they're through it in about 2 years, and they're good to go. And there may be those kinds of periods, but I learned over time that change is slow, that it's 4 steps forward, 3 steps back, and that patterns are, as one teacher, I think is Almas in the Diamond Heart work, said, our patterns are nearly immortal. So don't concern yourself with getting rid of them, but learning how to abide with them and navigate them, and when caught up in them, to be able to wait them out sometimes. So I noticed for myself that as I got a more realistic sense of what change is like and how long it takes, and how blind spots are pretty difficult and take time to penetrate and see through, it also just helped me have a lot more compassion and tolerance for the slowness of how people unfolded. So having a sense of the 9 types and being able to, as Don Risso said it, to really teach this work and to be able to transmit possibilities for people, it's really important that you learn to be able to feel the interior of each type, that through your own work, through your own practice, that you learn to be able to sense into and feel the body, heart, and head center of each type, and which I think was really drawn from the Gurdjieff work. And it's this idea that as I begin to feel the types, I have a deeper intuitive alliance and a deeper compassionate alliance with them, and which just makes for more room for people to be honest and speak the truth of their experience, and to not feel like they're going too slow or that they have to impress me or anything of that nature. So that said, I'm the possibility for people, if you study the Enneagram and first learn your type and develop the capacity to navigate your own labyrinth of patterns, that when it comes to working with people, of different types, there's just a deeper felt sense of this is what this is like, and this is what it feels like in myself and in them. And so I noticed, that out in the, back when I started writing my book, which was about 20 years ago, that there was almost no knowledge or very few people who were using the Enneagram. And as I would be working with people, I would just see the patterns over and over again and be able to, I found that people really wanted to know about their Enneagram types. It's like it gave them a handle. And some guys that I work with, for instance, in their first couple years of sobriety, where they're, a lot of times when people come into recovery, they're really contracted. They're, caught up in their fear, shame, and hurt patterns. And so the less becoming manifestations of their type are not there for a while. And but I noticed that when they learned about their type and they saw the map, that something relaxed and there was like hope. Oh, somebody's been here before. And I'm down here as a type 5, way down the levels of development, hallucinating, imagining people talking to me. And that's what 5s go through at level 8 and 9. And he said, one of my dear friends said, that just gave me so much hope that this was not an unknown, aberrant thing I was going through. And it allowed me to start slowly coming back and becoming more present and feeling safer and, doing the healing work I needed to do. So from that, those kinds of experiences, what I wrote about in my book were, numerous, folks I worked with over the years, and just seeing the best and the most offensive manifestations in each of the types, and just wanted to create a framework for people to start looking at and listening to the people they're working with, and ultimately to understand that, reactive patterns aren't chosen. People aren't just trying to be a pain in the neck, that from their suffering and the defense patterns they developed just when they were a little guy or a little gal, when those things get triggered, it's all a reaction to try to survive like they needed to do when they were little ones. So really wanted to map out how that could operate in each type so that people would, again, in particular, I can just remember some of the type 8s, when they would come into treatment. It's like having a boxer, in your group, and they're just like blunt as birth and just tell you whether, if they thought you were full of shit, they would just tell you that. But then as they softened, they would also just come out with the deepest grief and vulnerability that was, sort of the flip side of that toughness. So I really wanted to create some impressions for people to work with, so that they could have a map themselves for how do I hold the space for this person and their, type specific way of protecting their heart. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of really powerful things you said that I'd like to comment on. Yeah. And one of them is, thank you for sharing a bit about your story and your journey, because I think you're speaking to the power of when we go through something ourselves, then we can really understand more about the journey of another person, having gone through it ourselves. And I noticed how when you talked about, and this is so true, we talk about envy, etc. As adults, we believe that this is us. This is who we are. This is a tapestry of our being. And we forget that they're personality adaptations. They're really not a part of who we are. That's not our authentic nature. Yeah. So that came up for me. I really liked how you talked about holding up a gentle mirror, and how when some of the people that we work with, when they are in recovery or displaying difficult behaviors, that it's a reaction out of suffering. It's a reaction because they're in a lot of pain. They're not trying to be malicious or a bad person. It's a reflex when they're in pain and suffering. So for you to hold up a gentle mirror, and also the Enneagram is so beautiful because it's a map, and it's almost like, so I'm feeling exactly how I should be feeling given where I'm at on here. I'm normal right now. Not only am I normal, but somebody's been here before, and there's a way for me to get out of this. Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is, it really, I think you talked about how intellectual knowledge really hasn't been enough. It's really a journey, and it's like, it's a journey. It sets us forth on a path.
Yeah, well, it's the idea that that I learned is when I first, drank in the Enneagram, it was like filling up the library of my mind with all these ideas. And of course, part of the ideas is, since I know this, I could actually do something with it. And which, what I could do is begin the process of learning how to observe myself and my patterns in the moment. But that was very different than what I thought was going on in my head and where I thought I would be in 2 short weeks or even 5 short years. So it's this I think what really was also powerful was this idea that, central to the Enneagram teachings, and I've done a lot of work in the grief work, which, both Russ and Don had been involved in, and this idea that a central skill is learning to sense your body, being able to bring attention into your body, feel the sensations of the body, and that created a foundation for being able to start to feel the patterns as they got triggered in your body. And also, it's like created a sort of internal spotlight for noticing, oh, here are the familiar thoughts that start rolling through me. And so I have an objective way of seeing it. So a sense of understanding there's 3 centers, the gut, the body, the heart, and the head, was also really transformative for me, slowly but surely, such that, today, I remember one of the things that Russ used to say is, if you're a type 4, you know about envy probably a little bit every day. I said, that's true. It doesn't take much. I can be looking out the window and someone drives by and they have a hat on that's kind of cool, and immediately this envy flush goes through me, like, oh, they have a better life than me. I don't even know them. They could be suicidal as far as it. But in that moment, it's like this movie shows up. And over time, as I've learned to observe it, I can go, oh, there's that movie. It's still a bestseller in the movie of my mind. And there it is. I know the ending, so I can put it down for now. But, until then, I would be absorbed in it. I would become it. I would have bad thoughts about them. I hope they have a miserable death, so then we can be friends. All this kind of hypnotic capacity. And so as a 4, there was the envy piece. There was the sense of, I'm a unique and misunderstood outsider, and it breaks my heart. I'm so unique and you're so drab, but I'm also really darn lonely, so I'm kind of a little bit mad at you for being so ordinary and having friends. And, and then the whole list of having a feeling triggered that I know from myself, it felt like the only way I could locate my sense of identity was in my feelings. So I, always had a spotlight noticing what the weather was like down in my emotional belly, and I'd be watching and hoping I would find that one feeling that could free me. But so whatever emotion came up, I would be so identified with it that I'd lose the whole context of objectivity with the people around me, and would become self-absorbed, and then kind of a pain in the neck. So just to be able to see that, to have it written on the page, to know that it's something that developed as a result of, my own heart being broken as a little guy, wishing for a certain kind of connection with my mother and father that they, weren't able to give, and how I adapted, and, how that whole shape of my defense pattern formed into, having a fancy life and fantastical ideas and, hopes and dreams and losses, and that somebody wrote about that and spotted it. And so there was, again, that sense of hope that there's real wisdom here. This isn't made up. Somebody's been here and they've walked through it. And so that said, part of the work, I think, over time has been this recognition that doing spiritual inner work alone isn't difficult, it's impossible. I need mirrors. I need folks who can, when I talk about in the book is that, I rely on and use the 9 levels of health that Dawn developed and then Russ elaborated on. And so this idea that when I'm present and awake and not triggered, then I'm more likely residing in the healthier levels of presence, in which case my objectivity is available, sort of innate compassion and consideration is on board. My sense of feeling connected to human beings is there, and so there's a kind of joy of connection. But as I drop down the levels, 4, 5, and 6, we'd call the average levels. It's at 4, 5, and 6 that we start to get triggered by old hurts, anger, shame, humiliation, etc., and our patterns start to erupt as a protective measure. It's like they're instant, they're quick. And so one of the things we notice is that at level 5, people objectively feel that they're being healthy and normal, when in fact they're starting to contract and their defensive patterns are coming up. And because they're so identified with them, they imagine, or I'll imagine, well, I'm healthy, it's just you that's kind of messed up. If you would just change, I would have a good day. And then at level 6 is that as I get more desperate and more disconnected from my heart, which, being connected with my heart is a source of well-being, a sense of my capacity, my sense of identity. As that tightens due to my patterns and my fear, at level 6, it makes sense that I get aggressive about getting my needs met. I'm going to make you come through with what I need. And I remember when Russ was teaching the levels, my very first time with him in 2006, he said, when people are down at level 6 and 7, they imagine themselves as healthy. They have no clue. It's like their blinders are up. And he said at level 5 on down, the blinders take over and they don't have eyes to see with. So part of the work is, for myself to learn what are the indications that I'm drifting into unconscious patterns. What are my red flags, so to speak? And, with each type, there's a red flag that says, don't go, this is a warning. And for me as a type 4, it was, getting triggered into fantasizing about my life rather than living it. Mm-hmm. And also getting habituated to whatever my mood state was. Mm-hmm. That would be kind of the trance that was saying, you're going down the well, and you imagine that you're healthier than everyone else, and actually you're hurting their feelings, and you think you're just being honest. So in writing the book, I really wanted to map out, talk about how the distortions occur for each type and how they imagine themselves responding healthily when the receiver of the behavior is going, oh my God, tone that down. And to understand, well, they can't see that. So how can you be, first, non-reactive to that? And then second, a kind mirror that just, begins to speak to it so that they might stop in the moment and sense the pattern. Mm-hmm. So I know I've just thrown a lot at you, but anything coming up for you?
It's fantastic. Yeah. When somebody is, when we're in, let's say, levels, 5, 6, 7, let's say, mm-hmm. or later, and then you said, the blinders really go up. I'm kind of tying it to, I think the closer to the levels of health, the more open our heart is. Yes. The closer to being on the unhealthy levels, the more our heart closes. And I imagine the more our heart closes, the less capacity for self-awareness that we have. Because the heart is one of our tools for a vessel for wisdom, right? And self-awareness, I think.
Yeah, huge.
So that's...
Yes. So it's the idea that at, levels 1, 2, and 3, which we call the healthy levels.
Yeah.
The heart is open. I can feel my heart. I can feel the hearts of others. I can sense when I've hurt someone else because my heart's open and I feel it too, and I apologize. and I have the capacity to give and receive love. So there's that, spacious openness and that lovely quality of feeling connected. And then as I hit level 4, we say that level 4, it's a day without presence where we're not doing much damage. We're in the habit of our type. It's a sort of our social way of being, our role. But at level 5, the heart's closed down. And for self-protection, for a variety of reasons, it could be, I mean, some people, depending on their childhoods, will arrive more solidly at the lower levels, clamp down. Their heart's really tight because it's like if I come out, if my heart starts to open, I'm going to be annihilated. And so part of the work is how do we continue to create the ground for them to open, to see it safe. And what I notice in working with people is that they'll open up and just come full forward, and you just see their beautiful hearts, their little guy or little gals that are looking at you, and then it closes down and they back away. And then they have to slowly but surely come forward, step forward, show themselves, and then they back away. And so it's you could say that the work of going up the levels of health have something to do with expansion and then contraction. And maybe not going all the way back to where it was, but it's an expansion and a contraction, and that's a natural pattern of growth. So I might say that, so if I'm, living at level 4, and let's say I go to a workshop, and it's one of these workshops where my heart opens and I just feel the love of everybody around me. And it's like, my heart's like a flower and opens, and I see, oh, gee, I really love these people. This is amazing. Could I just stay here at this moment of awakeness? And then I go home, and I would notice 3 or 4 days, my heart would recede into its protected patterns, and I would start getting grumpy with everybody like I had before. And I went, what a bummer. I just lost whatever that was. And then my teacher would say, well, you got to work for that. It's open and closed, and it's going to take time, but that's normal. But I was really shocked in the beginning. And then, I might notice, I can remember one time I was driving down the road, and I was, going to a workshop I was going to teach, and this impression came to me of all the kindness that my wife had given me in supporting me on my journey. And I called her up while I'm driving, and she wasn't there, so the voice record went on, and I said, I want to thank you for all of your loving kindness over the years. It's allowed me to come forward and do this work. And then somebody cut in front of me, and I forgot I was talking to her. I started banging on the horn, and they went, I just came back. I just went down to level 6. That's amazing. I'll be interested to hear how you took that. And then I hung up, and she called back about 3 minutes later, just laughing, going, that was great. I did get to witness you go down the levels when you got triggered. So, it can be fast and quick like that. And but the work for me in terms of evolution for self and people I'm working with is that my ability to recover is much quicker than it was when I first started this work. And, as a type 4, if I'd gotten triggered as the outsider, I might sort of stay there for 3 or 4 weeks and build a small cathedral to the suffering and worship at it every morning, and then come out of it and go, wow, I just wasted a whole month. So anyway, those are some thoughts.
Yeah.
Put out to you.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I think that's helpful for everybody to know with the expanding and the contracting through the levels of health, so that we don't expect that if we don't get to levels 1, 2, and 3 in theta, that we're failing somehow, right? Or that we're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised, because I think that's how the universe works and how nature works. Even the way we breathe is in and out. It's never just out the whole time.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that we would mirror that. And something huge when I work with couples and things get better, what helped? Awareness is the first thing they say. And that's what I'm hearing you say too, is awareness of one's body. What I heard you say, I think, is awareness of one's body, knowing when you're getting triggered, and then having this inner observer and choosing a different behavior or a different perspective, a different meaning.
Yeah. And I would just add a little, so, part of the work that, that comes through so many different traditions is this idea of, can I learn to observe myself when I'm in the pattern with compassion or just neutral objectivity, and allow myself to just sense my body, my heart, and notice what's going on in the circus of my mind without trying to fix it or beat myself up. And it took me a while to realize that any action I took of beating myself up actually was a part of the pattern I was trying to get rid of. And that then it didn't work. And I remember my mentor saying, you know, the more you beat yourself up, the more those patterns stick to you like Velcro. Try just touching them lightly with your observation. So, and you know, that's embodied in all the Enneagram work that I've been around and I've been taught, but that's a powerful way of observing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Like the more we want something to go away and demand we don't want it, it's almost like the more we disown it, the harder it sticks to us.
yeah,
I think maybe in part because it really so desperately wants to be looked at and healed. And the more we
yeah.
are gentle with it and allow it to be, the softer it is and loosens its grip.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was so counterintuitive to me is that observing without applying my will to changing the pattern is what would lighten it and dissolve it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, observation without judgment is what breaks the trance and softens and maybe calls something up. You know, internally, presence or our own resources that start to soften the hypnotic power. And I think that's what's great about working with, you know, the types. Like each type has a sort of hypnotic trance they go into.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the type 8, you know, the challenger, the powerful dynamic type, is their trance is, you know, that I'm not safe here, that people are going to hurt me, and I got to power up and toughen up. And it happens in a flash. It's protective. And if you're in my way, I might happen to annihilate you later on. I may apologize or have to sweep you up. But, you know, it's that sense of coming forward with force. And as they develop more capacity to absorb themselves, they can feel the arising of that energy and learn to observe it without having it take them, you know, taking them into action or burying it. You know, it's this whole thing of, can I just abide? There's that energy. I just want to, you know, I just feel that intense heat in my core and it wants to go someplace. But if I learn to be with it and abide with it, something starts to shift and something more connected with my heart starts to show up. So, you know, it becomes a practice. Each type, you know, the type 9 is this sense of when I'm triggered, I go invisible. Like you can't see me. How are you doing? I'm fine. But inside it's like I'm nervous but there's this sense that I just become almost like I blend into the couch so you don't even see me, or I become, you know, so unpresent that it's like I just disappear even in front of you. And so, you know, learning to see that pattern. The challenge is for each of the types when they start to notice the pattern is if they are able to have enough presence not to react. The first response is, I'm going to be killed. My inner critic's going, you'll die. The 8, if you don't protect yourself, you will die. The 9, you will be dissolved in outer space. So there's this sense of knowing, okay, as I begin to see my patterns and have enough presence to resist the reactivity, I'm going to come face to face with my life's going to end. Okay, I don't want that. I'll just go back to the pattern. And, you know, and so it's just knowing that in advance allows me to tolerate it a little bit longer or get the support I need so I, you know, don't go off the rails. But it's a fascinating thing to watch as people approach and start to sort of pierce through their reactivity. You would think that the sun would shine and everything would be great, but the inner critic's going, okay, good for you, now you're going to die. But once you know that, you know, you can step into it and feel it and you're still here, and then you come back and do it again. So, as I said, each type has a different sort of mechanism, but all at the core of it, in my experience, is that to the level that a little one had to protect their heart is to the extent that they had to draw on their reactive patterns to protect it. And so it depends on that. I mean, I know people who've had more trauma have a longer journey to unpack these things. But, you know, it's certainly in the world of addiction, many people come in who have been traumatized in a variety of different ways, uh, family, legal system, etc. And they come in ready to protect their lives, and it's so amazing to see somebody transform and come forward, at least for those 10 or 15 minutes, and then go back and then come forward, and to see that there's a logic to it. It isn't happenstance. That there's a real logic to this unpacking of their suffering.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I I think a lot of what you're talking about, more trauma that we had, the more self-protective we need to be, the more heavily we lean on our types habits to
yes,
protect us. And
yes,
those decisions that we made in childhood about, no, 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 I have to suppress this part of myself. No, 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 it's not safe to do this. But as adults, when we're called to do it, I mean, that's pretty powerful. Of no, you could die.
yeah,
It's nothing. And so I think what you're saying is and what I've noticed is it's a willingness to be uncomfortable, a willingness to sit with tension, a willingness to sit with anxiety and try not to reflexively get out of it so quickly. And that's growth. It's
that's
counterintuitive,
huge,
but yeah.
huge growth, huge
Yeah.
growth, because the instinct is to bolt out of the room, and
Yeah.
because that's what one had to do when I was a little boy or a little girl, and developing. You point to something really important: is how do I learn to develop tolerance for this kind of suffering,
Yeah.
and so I can bear it a little bit longer and a little bit
Yeah.
longer until it allows me to start to transform. And that's where I think, what I noticed in the addiction world, the most powerful tool for neutralizing that discomfort is just simple kindness.
Mm.
Just simple kindness, simple compassion. And, if you've been around circles of recovery, the sense that you're welcome as you are, that there's no judgment here, um, that I think does more than any theoretical structure. There's just something about kindness and compassion from the heart that's sincere and authentic, that has a way of reaching through the patterns and touching a person's heart. And that what really starts the process of there's hope here. And it's not complicated. It's just this sense of I can see your suffering and I'm with you. And from there, as people feel that, as their hearts get touched, then they're able to start taking on the other information and learning the practices. But that's I think that gets understated sometimes. It's just how powerful that is.
A lot of people on the recovery journey have had a lot of people who are really tough on them in life, and they've been through a lot, and they're probably really hard on themselves.
Very
And so
hard.
to be in the presence of somebody who can do that, like you said, be kind, be loving, be
Mm-hmm.
accepting, and even talk about their own journey like you are. Like, hey, I'm on the same level here to,
Yeah.
really help. What a gift to give them when they can't feel that
Mhm.
themselves.
Yeah, and I know it certainly helped me with my, therapist mentors that have the capacity to talk about their life such that I realize that they're human and they're going through their own version of it. And there's no elite, advanced, enlightened person in front of you. As my teacher would say, we're pretty much equal. We're crawling on our hands and knees to enlightenment and awareness, and we're just doing it together. And some of us are a little bit ahead in one place and another in another, and we're just here to support each other. And I think that's so. That's what's really been powerful about 12-step work. The best of 12-step is just that acknowledgement that we're all human. We've all had our hearts broken, and we've all reacted in different ways based on our type. So, for instance, that the type one, which we often call the reformer, I call the type one the merciful teacher. When they're healthy, they have this kind of grounded humility and wish to be a vehicle of service, maximizing people's experience, a very powerful ability to notice their own flaws without eviscerating themselves. It's kind of like if you've ever heard Father Rohr talk about himself as a type one, He'll say, I'm really on a growth streak here. 30% of the day I was awake today. I was present. And then he'll laugh and chuckle and say, well, it used to be only 2%, but 30% is pretty darn good. And so the one who's healthy is really merciful, really helpful, very fair. But as their heart has been broken, they resort to, first off, judging themselves horribly as bad people, and then sharing it and letting you know just really how fundamentally bad you are. And it's all, again, this sense of protection. When my heart's closed, that's my protection package. And I can make you feel like you're the worst failure on earth without even speaking a word. It just comes off my energy field. So, again, if I know that, as a therapist and counselor, when we've had type 1s in group and they're having a hard time, they usually start off by letting the staff know exactly everywhere they're making errors and why they do such bad counseling. They've been sober a week, right? And they just like eviscerate. And then the people who aren't doing their part, in the rehab. And then as they get healthier, that starts to relax. And then they start to share their own brokenness around just the self-judgment they've gone through. And so something more humble and gentle comes forward. And then they really become a leader in bringing mercy to people. So it's, just that evolution up to levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the beauty of the Enneagram is when you're sitting with somebody, you're able to, when they're not able to feel or be in their higher self, let's say they're in level 7 and they're suffering, you're able to sit with that person and their higher self, you see it. They can't yet. Yeah. But if you can, that's a gift. And then also what you said earlier, I felt was really powerful of sometimes you're not doing anything. In other words, you're not saying anything, but the way you're being is actually really, you're being loving, you're being open, you have an open heart. And I think when you, as somebody who's sitting and helping somebody has that open heart, you're like a beacon, and it helps them then get in touch with their own heart, which is part of growth for them and healing and moving up the levels of health.
Yeah. And one of the things that Don Riso used to talk about, and also my mentor, was this idea that as you become able to inhabit your heart and be more present in your 3 centers, that it heals the people you're with without speaking a word. And it also transmits healing, to your ancestors in both directions. And there's something about, to the extent you can, that's why you hear people say, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Because there's a way that, your atmosphere starts to affect those around you. And as my mentor would say, okay, Michael, you are a cell in the body of humanity. If you purify that cell, it will have untold positive effects on those around you. So do your inner work and try not to change other people, and just, keep your focus on yourself and be kind. And so I think that's the other thing that I really got a big lesson on, this idea that it's not I can't change, cure, or control another person. It's sort of an Al-Anon principle, but that any kind of coercion to make somebody change actually strips their will and makes it harder for them in the long run. And that, this is a program of suggestion, not enforcement, and anything that's judged will tighten and make it more difficult. So it's just kind of a philosophy that I think that comes out of the Enneagram and other traditions too. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting about human nature, that the more somebody feels coerced, the more we kind of rebel or push against it. Or like what you said, I think you said free will is stripped or something like that.
Yes. So coercion, any kind of coercion where the person's will hasn't been activated on their own, only has them imitating, but since they're not really coming from a place of their own will, it actually enables them so they don't even have to, bring that forward, and then it weakens them in the long run. And that was a big one for me, because certainly, and this may be a forest thing, and that's a whole other story we can have, but this idea that, when I'm sort of in a tense place, I can start imagining what other people, what they ought to do for their own transformation pattern. My beloved wife has been the subject of my lessons, in which case she just doesn't listen to them anymore. She'll go, take it someplace else. We've done this drill. But there's a sense of, I want to give you what I have. And if I can't inject it in you, then I'll trick you, or I'll coerce you, or I'll do hypnosis so that you, because I think in that moment when I'm, suffering, that I have some kind of intuitive knowledge about what's good for you. And my teacher would say, Michael, do I think your hands are full with yourself this lifetime? Yeah, I think it's probably true. Says, well, leave those people alone, would you? They'll appreciate you more. So,
yeah. So that might be, and I know this is probably a whole other conversation, but if somebody's in a relationship or has a family member who's struggling with recovery, I think the inclination is for us to tell them what to do, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Tell them what to do and how to do it, and even get bossy and demanding about it. And that can only solidify it even more.
It does. They tighten. I discovered that my wife knows exactly what she needs to do without me prepping her for it. And it's like, oh, I guess she can. Why did I think I knew? Well, in the 4 pattern, we have the arrow to 1. And in relationships under stress, 4s can go to the less healthy aspect of 1 and become a perfectionist on their partner and try to, improve them. And I walked down that lane many, many times, and I've gotten much better at not doing it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and I relate to that as well as a 4, as a fellow 4. So spot on. Yeah. When did you write your book that I referenced in your bio?
Well, it was published about 14 months ago. It had been a 30-year project, starting with Don Risso's ideas, and it was a long journey, but actually, the longer it took, the better the book got. And it just got clearer. It took me a good 30 years to get clear enough to write objectively about more things. So,
I imagine it's an expansion of some of what we talked about today.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And so each type, there's a real look at, sort of the volume of how they operate under stress, the things that trigger them, the things that I need to learn patience around tolerating, the annoyances of their patterns, and, and something around remembering that when they're being annoying, they don't know it. And in fact, when I'm being annoying, I don't usually know it until somebody taps me on the shoulder. So it's not like we're that much different. But even sharing that, that we all go unconscious every day for at least moments, if not part of the day. And, I just feel fortunate to have more moments of presence where I can see what's going on and appreciate it. But the book itself really is a kind of a deep dive into each type, with suggestions, type-specific suggestions for each type in terms of how to help them take on practices that help them to get a glimpse of their personality patterns with kindness, with curiosity, and if you can bring in some humor, that's great too. I often say, as my mentor would say to me, Michael, I want you to just notice how many times that personality robot of yours runs out into the street and blocks traffic. Just try to be aware when there it goes, and it's so fast she didn't spot it until afterwards. And then to bring a sense of lightness and humor to it. As he would say, you didn't decide when you were 3 years old that you would have this pattern that would torment you and others when you got older. You just inherited it. So because God has a sense of humor, you have to learn how to neutralize it. So try to bring some humor to it. And that's certainly, if you're around any of the 12-step programs, there's always a lot of humor that comes in to this whole journey. So, anyway.
Well, thank you so much. This was such an important and wonderful conversation and helpful to have with you. Your book sounds great, by the way, and congratulations with
thank you.
Putting it out there. And you also are offering a free gift. So do you want to just say a bit about what attendees will get?
Yeah. So what I'm what they will be able to do is download an audio chapter from the book and just get a sense of that. And yeah. So
Great. And then a link to order the book as well.
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah. Great to be with you, Michele. Great to
Okay.
be with you. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.